Okay, so hi everybody and welcome back to another cool tutorial. This time we will talk about green screen compositing and a little bit of virtual production. I mean, not the real virtual production with all the cool LED walls and stuff like that, but kind of like a poor man's approach for everybody out there with no budget. So here's the idea for a workflow. We will start with the green screen footage inside of After Effects and try to remove the green screen background. Then render out the footage as a PNG sequence and import this into SwitchLight. We will talk about that later. And once we extracted the maps from SwitchLight, we will import the footage inside of Blender. We will use some kit bashing techniques to create virtual sets and then bring all the stuff back into After Effects to composite the final shot. So without further ado, let's get started. And as you can see, I was lighting myself in front of a green screen, a pretty cheap setup with only 2 lights, and it's just me opening up a letter. Pretty boring stuff, and it was filmed pretty flat as you can see, so I'm using 2 softboxes, one over here and one over here. And there are 2 good reasons for a flat light setup. One is of course you have a nice and even lit green screen with no shadows, which is a little bit better for the compositing later on. And furthermore, it's pretty important to have a nice flat image of yourself or the actor or the actress that you're about to film, because SwitchLight will have a little bit more trouble when you have a pretty contrasty shot. And you will lose a lot of details because of this contrasty image, so really do yourself a favor and film yourself as flat as possible without any shadows if possible, so a pretty high key approach. And this will lead to really better results inside of SwitchLight, trust me. But in the first step, let's really quickly prepare our scene for SwitchLight. So if you ever run into the topic of filming green screen and you have not enough green screen to fill up the whole room, so it's pretty easy to get rid of this problem. So we can use a mask. So in this case, let's select the footage, select our mask tool, and let's really quickly draw a line around the subject. Something like this is fine. Okay. And now we are left with only our green screen footage, which is good, because now it's much easier to separate our object from the background. In After Effects, we can use a plugin called Keylight. And in After Effects, you get a combination of effects to get better results within your green screen footage. And in this case, After Effects is telling us that we can use Keylight, a key cleaner, and spill suppressor, which is pretty handy once you just have some reflecting light of your green screen on the subject. So we can use this combination and put it onto our subject like this. And once we do that, we can start with the keylight effect. So what we first have to do is we have to tell the program which color we want to eliminate. In this case, it's the green color of our backdrop. So we can take this tool here and just pick a color. And we can, for example, choose this one. And this is a good starting point, but like I said in previous tutorials, we can get this a little bit more clean. So let's switch our view from the intermediate result to screen matte. So we can see really what's going on, and we need to ensure that our background is really black and our subject in the foreground is more or less white. And we can do that by playing around with the 2 values, with black and with white. So crank up the blacks a little bit so that the backdrop is really black, so we get a nice separation. And bring down the white value until we have more or less a nice silhouette. In this very case, it's a little bit harder to achieve, but I think somewhere around here should be fine. And then we can go back to our view and change this to intermediate or even final result, doesn't matter. And now we have a better separation from our green screen. And in order to just get rid of this nasty edges around the subject, we can use the key cleaner and we can higher the alpha contrast and bring down the strange a little bit, just in order to get rid of these artifacts. And if you like, you can play around with the shrink value and with the screen softness just to have some nice edges around the subject, especially in the hair. And if you're running into the problem that you have some spilling on your clothes or on the hair, you can use the advanced spill suppressor. Turn this on. And now you can see we have a little bit of greenish tint going on. And in order to get rid of this, we can use the ultra method instead of the standard one. And now we should have a nice clean result. If you're running into the problem that you have some sort of like smaller glitches or some sort of noise within the black parts, you can try to use a different replace method. For example, changing the soft color to hard one. And sometimes this will help with your green screen footage and you get a much cleaner result. Okay, and now the first step is done. We have separated our object pretty good. And we can double check if our keying was good by using a solid, which is a little bit brighter, and putting it in the background and double check if there are any nasty artifacts left. I think it's overall a good result. Not super good, but good enough for our example here. Okay, so now that our footage is ready, we can export this and bring it right into SwitchLight. And as some of you might know, SwitchLight is a new software from the company Beeple. And it is using AI technology in order to turn any footage into a workable PBR setup, which you can use, for example, in a software like Blender, and then use especially the normal map and the occlusion map in order to relight your footage in whatever context you like. And this is really a game changer. So if you ever run into the problem of doing a shoot and you realize your light setup was not the best, this is a pretty powerful technique to get a little bit more of creative freedom and redirection in the post-production. And like it said here, we can use this AI technology to get ourselves a nice physically based rendering, so the PBR workflow with all the maps that we need, albedo, normal, depth, roughness, specular, and ambient occlusion, and get ourselves a little bit more control within the post-production. And as you can see in these results, this is a pretty powerful setup. Okay, so now we need to get our footage into SwitchLight. And the most important thing is that we need to have an alpha channel for our video footage. So if you would just render this out as a normal movie sequence, we will lose all the alpha information that we need in order to have a nice result. So please ensure that you render out your footage as an image sequence, for example, with a PNG or TIFF sequence, and then re-import this into SwitchLight. So we will do the same thing here in After Effects. We can go into our comp settings and bring this to our render queue. And then we can set up a PNG sequence with alpha channel, pretty important. And then just search for a place to save all our images. In this case, I'm using my desktop, pretty important. Make sure that you have like a subfolder, otherwise you will have a lot of images on your desktop. And then we can save this and start rendering. And because this is a 4K image, this will take some time, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes. And then we can use our image sequence and bring this into SwitchLight. Okay, and in order to download the SwitchLight Studio, you can go onto the download section and download this for your computer, whether it's Windows or Mac. And we can go with the installation for SwitchLight Studio, which I think all of you can handle. And we can go directly into SwitchLight. And SwitchLight is starting to look like this once you installed the software properly. And we can log in. For this one, you need to have an account for Beeple. And of course, just pay a subscription for a month. I think it's about $12 for a month. You can quit this at any point. So you're not trapped in a pricey model. You can skip this at any time and people will not charge you. Okay, so we can just sign in and then there's a window saying that the authentication was successful and we can close this window. And then we are inside of SwitchLight, as you can see. Disclaimer, when you first start SwitchLight, this system dependency will just take a few minutes to render or to load. So this will take like another 5 to 10 minutes for the first run, but after that it goes pretty quick, as you can see. And then the AI model will have to load, and this will take a few minutes too. But when you open the software the next time, everything goes pretty quick. And as you can see, the software SwitchLight is offering different kind of AI features that we can follow along. So our main goal will be the material extraction, but the background removal is pretty powerful as well. So maybe we will turn back to this later on. This is what you get. So a pretty solid and pretty easy to understand menu. If you have just an image, you can go with the image model. Other than that, we will use the video model. The strength is already set to 4, so this is good. And then we can select our input directory. In this case, it's on our desktop. So we can search for our office shot and we can click the first image. This is fine. And we can define an output directory. In this case, I'm using the desktop too. And we can create a new folder and call this Office SwitchLight. Okay. And all you have to do now is to hit extract. And that's really all there's to it. As you can see in the terminal output, you can read what's going on. So as the first step, the AI model will load and the program will control if all the directories are correct. And then it will start creating a temporary file. And this is pretty important because the software will run the whole frames 2 times. So in the first place, all the 170 frames will be calculated. And once all the 170 frames are done, it will run a second iteration where it will try to deflicker the material. And I'm working with this for a few months now, and I have never run into any issue with flickering stuff. So the frames are very consistent between each frame, so the program will do a pretty good job. And like before, we will have to wait like 10 minutes until the model is done. And once everything is correct, there will be a message telling us that the extraction was successful. Okay, and once the extraction is finished, you will see this message popping up that you can view the results in the output directory. And if we click OK, the software will open up the folder for us, and there we'll have the different maps, the albedo, the depth, the key map, the normal map, occlusion, roughness, specular, and pretty important, our temporary folder. And there you will find all the maps that you'll find previously, but without the deflicker filter. So actually you can really delete the temp folder, because you will have the final result within these maps. And then we can go to the next step, which will be to import this into Blender. So as you can see, we are working with Blender 4.1 because I want to use the old Eevee version, which will render a little bit faster because at the very end I was about to render 35 different VFX shots, and for this I needed a little bit more of a shorter render time, so this is the reason why I switched to the old Eevee instead of Eevee Next. But other than that, it's the same setup as in Blender 4.2. And as you might have known, if we go back into SwitchLight, there you will find at the very bottom of our page the free plugin, which is pretty great. So you can download this one for Blender and install it. I will just save this on my desktop and then install it inside of Blender. And once you install the plugin, you will have like this setup here. So SwitchLight is asking for a PBR directory where we will find all of our maps. So we can click on the map and search for our folder that we've created within SwitchLight. In this case, it's the SwitchLight folder. And all we have to do is to find the directory where we will find all the maps, the albedo, depth, key, normal, occlusion, roughness, and specular map. And click on accept. And then we can load up our PBR sequence. And what the add-on is doing for us, it will create not only the image sequence, it will create a camera and a point light so you can play around. And if we switch into our rendered mode, you can see what we get. Let me open up a second window and then switch into the camera view, hide everything we don't need. So here's my clip. And if I now start to turn around my light, you can see the magic that is going to happen. So you can see the normal map that was created inside of SwitchLight is working pretty great. And you can create different moods for our scene. And the first thing that we need to change, as you see, is, if we go closer, that my skin is a little bit too rough. So it looks like a scene where I'm really sweating or I'm standing in the pouring rain. So this is a little bit extreme for my taste. So let's switch into the shader editor and click on our plane. And here you will see the setup that the plugin is doing for us. So actually nothing too fancy, but a little bit of a difference here in the specular map. Here they have like a different, or they have a little bit more complicated setup with some math nodes, but other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So if we isolate this one, we have the albedo map, so only our color information. We got the normal map, and we got our roughness that we will change, and we got our specular, looking pretty similar, and our key map, which is pretty important because this is kind of like, or it's acting like a mask for us, so we can really define which part of the video should be transparent, which one not. And if we combine this to our principled BSDF, we will have this pretty awesome setup. And the only thing that I would like to change is to add in a little bit of a color ramp between my roughness and the principled BSDF. So let's search for color ramp, and let's plug this in. And really play around a little bit with the values until we get a result that we like, so that my face will not look that sweaty anymore. So this is before and this is after. Don't overdo it because there's a little bit of roughness going on in the skin, but not too much. Somewhere around here should be fine. And what you can do, which is optional, You can play around with the subsurface scattering, because I think there will be a little bit of subsurface scattering, so we will change the value to 0.1. Don't overdo this, because otherwise it will look a little bit like this and everything is a little bit weird. So let's change this to a value of 0.1 or 2. That should be fine, and will give you better results in the very end. Okay, so these are the two things that I'd like to change. So, and then starts the fun part. So you can use your point lights, you can duplicate stuff, and you can really start to really light your actor or your actress and really create some amazing results. I mean, obviously there are some limitations. The first one would be kind of like a rim light situation, because it's a 2D plane, and even though if we use a displacement modifier with the depth mask, you will not really get to the point where you get a nice rim light. So there are some restrictions to that. Keep that in mind when you have a scene where maybe the actor is passing a few lights that are above the character. That will create some really ugly looking artifacts. Look at that. Even though if I just bring down the power a little bit, it will just not look that good, because the normal map quality is still pretty good, but not that good that we can create some good lights. So I think somewhere around here, where the top light is creating this nice rim, is fine. Other than that, it will create some weird looking results. So keep that in mind, that you will not have a full control over the backlight of your character. So if you want to do that, please try to film this within the green screen, so you will have a better separation from your subject and the background. But other than that, you can create some amazing results. And what I like to do is to take this image plane, copy it, and put it into my very first scene. So as you can see, I just kit bashed a few of these assets from different resources like Sketchweb, Polyhaven, and a little bit of Quixel Megascans. And this is kind of like the result. And then I just light up the whole scene with different point lights and area lights and a spotlight, and created kind of like this moody atmosphere of a film noir scene. And now we can import our plane into this very scene and then just start playing around. Maybe we can scale this up a little bit and put this into the position. So I think I was sitting somewhere around here. And if we take a look through the camera, it will look something like this. And this is actually a pretty good starting point. And furthermore, we can just play around with our lights and really nail the lighting however we like, and use the curtains as a cookie element to break up the light to get a nice shape around my face. And once again, here's a pretty important tip for your creation process. The secret sauce for a good image is the right amount of fill light. So as you can see, our light here looks pretty good, and this is because of the point light at our desk. So it is motivated by the lamp that you can see here. And if we turn this off, you can see the loss of quality. If we just use our key light, which is coming from the window, and if we turn this back on, our overall sequence will look totally different. So the magic here with SwitchLight is really to find the sweet spot for our fill. Other than that, your normal map will look a little bit crappy, and you will lose a lot of detail within your image sequence. So like you would do on a real set, you need to keep in mind that you will need a key light, but also kind of like a fill light and the rim light, always motivated by the practical lights within your scene, to really ensure that your subject will be isolated or separated by the background. And as a last tip for this first tutorial, you have to keep in mind that you have to change the shadow mode of your image. So if we isolate this and just set up real quick a point light and some sort of background element, so I can tell you the problem. So I want to have some sort of nice contact shadows, which is nice for the overall integration of our green screen footage with the virtual background. And as you can see, the shadow mode of our image plane by default is completely wrong. And our shadow is being created by the rectangle form of our image plane instead of our person here in the front. So we need to change our settings within our material. And if we scroll down to our settings down here, you will see that the shadow mode is set to opaque. If we change this one to alpha clip, we will have the correct shadow of our person. So this is really important if we set up our image plane. So really ensure that your shadow mode is set to alpha clip instead of opaque, and then we will create the right shadow. Okay, if I just turn this back on and get my scene back and take a look through the camera and just let the camera roll, everything is looking fine. Perfect. Okay, so I think this is enough information for the first tutorial. In the next part, we will take care a little bit more about tips and tricks around the SwitchLight workflow. And of course, we will take care of the compositing and rendering the correct way in order to get nice results within our setup. Thank you very much, and we will see us in the next tutorial.